We are City of Five Nations podcast, 30 days of community building series. What a great joy it's been so far. And today we have another spectacular individual from right here in the City of Five Nations, a 35 plus year business professional, a gentleman that I had the pleasure of meeting years ago. And now I work alongside of him in many different endeavors in trying to help our community and help our residents all come together. Of course, I'm talking about Ed Bolt. Let's bring Commissioner Ed Bolt in. And Ed,
how are you, Daniel?
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, I'm glad to do it. This was a awesome offer. I was very excited to do it for you.
Well, it's an interesting time for all of us, and I bet you've been having a lot of these kind of meetings.
Well, we have been, and truthfully, going back to my AT&T days, because it was a big worldwide company and we were a technology company, we did a lot of these, on a corporate basis. So nothing new. Another day in the
and a couple of things that we have in common that you may not realize. So first of all, let's start with AT&T. Back when it was Western Electric, and then Southwestern Bell, and then it went to AT&T, then Lucent, then even back to AT&T. My father-in-law of that.
Okay, that's kind of different parts of the operation. Western Electric was the manufacturing arm for AT&T, and that's who my dad worked for. In fact, that's how we got to Oklahoma. We were from the Boston area. He worked in the North Andover Western Electric plant, and then December of 1968. So that's been 50 plus years ago, he was transferred to the works down here in Oklahoma City that's over like Reno between Rockwell and Council. Now, when I worked for them, I was on the actual telephone company side of it. So when I went to work for them in 1980, it was Southwestern Bell. 1984 is when divestiture happened and they were split off, all the little separate companies by themselves. And then AT&T was very aggressive and we started buying back some of the other R boxes, they were called. And so we became SBC, and then we finally ended up buying AT&T back. So we took the AT&T name because when you do business on a global basis, everybody knew the AT&T name, but nobody would have known the SBC name. Long story.
And as I know, but it's wonderful because, I very much look up to Paul Willis, my father-in-law, wonderful man in so many different ways. And, every day he was up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, taking off to Oklahoma City to get his job done for his family. And it really was a great example for a young man and a young father to have somebody like that alongside of me that I can watch.
My dad worked together out there at the plant then.
I bet that they did. He actually was moved to Shawnee and worked out of the plant, I believe, with Western Electric by the railroad tracks right there at the end of Main Street when you go around the corner and back by Ada-Lot and that. And then also he worked in the big rectangle brick building on Broadway just by the church.
Right, the switching office, those were interesting to go in and see because years ago, those were the old mechanical switches, the old step-by-step offices, and those were really much more interesting to look at because those big switches would move and click, and you could actually hear them dialing out the number. And then they changed to what they called crossbar offices, which did a little clicking but weren't as big to look at. They used little wire spring relays, and then everything went electronic and it just became a box that sit there and hum and took up a fraction of the space. So a lot of those switching offices, when they emptied everything out of there, you probably could have put a bowling alley in there. So it's kind of interesting how that stuff progressed through the years. So anyway, I've never been in that one there at Shawnee.
It brings us full circle because I remember when he was up actually installing video conferencing at the Air Force Base when it was like the newest thing back in the 80s or something.
Yeah. In fact, let me tell you something. I have an award downstairs. I was in sales and I sold the very first distance learning network. So I was working with all the schools and the technology centers back in the 90s, trying to do distance learning and we were doing it over this technology called ATM, or asynchronous transfer mode. And I was the person that sold the very first one of those in all of Southwestern Bell. So I actually got this big corporate award downstairs, a Nova Award for doing that. So now that technology has changed so much, because here we're doing it over the internet, which I think is H.323. And you never could have dreamed of doing something like we're doing today back at those times. It used what we thought were massive pipes back then. That asynchronous transfer mode was 3 DS3s, or about 655 megabits, which seemed like an amazing amount of information to be coming in over one pipe. But anyway, things change. It's kind of funny how they work out.
They do. They change. And you talk about downstairs. Another thing that we have in common, Ed, that is so dear to my heart is as my kids grew up, the swimming pool in your backyard, Gordon and Mary Jane Richards, my kids actually grew up in that swimming pool. They were such sweet people.
Oh, they're just awesome people. And, we hear that from a lot of people that knew them. They lived here for so long. They lived in this house for 45 years. And, we still see Gordon, super nice guy. And when we have our block parties over here, because we're block leaders for community renewal and been real involved in that since the get-go, we invite Gordon over, and he comes, and he just has a ball. And the neighbors just love seeing him, because, some of them lived here with him for, 30, 40 of those years anyway. So anyway, we feel very fortunate to have this house.
Well, and you talked about you wanted to come back in. You were a little bit off of Lake Road out there, and you came back into the city, and you reconnected, and how great that's been, not only for you, but for your neighbors and the entire community, because you've worked really hard since your retirement to help with a lot of things in the community, and not in the least, you were one of the first to actually renovate a building downtown. Tell us about that.
Yeah. When I look at the pictures of that building now and what I bought, I had to be crazy. I mean, it was one that should have been condemned. It was caved in. In fact, when the guy told me we ought to look at that building, I went over there and looked through the front window, and you couldn't hardly see back in, because it was all, everything was just caved in. And when I called the guy that owned the building, he goes, "Yeah, I'd talk to you about selling that." And he says it's 2,500 square feet. And I thought, there is no way. So I actually went on to like Google Earth and looked at a satellite image, and you could see that it went back in, 100 feet, like he said. So basically we gutted the entire thing, redid it, made it a new building. We assumed everything was bad, so all new plumbing in and out. The water comes in off the Main Street side, and the the sewer and everything goes out the back. It was real interesting when we cut in the concrete floor for the water lines. We kept running into horseshoes, and so we did research the history of the building. It was built in 1905, but from the land run until 2005, when that was built, that area down there was stables. So that made perfect sense. We run into all those horseshoes. So Phyllis had a lady that she was, it was like from her previous marriage was like a sister-in-law, or brother-in-law's wife. And they know all about the horses and all about that kind of stuff. So it's what they do. So we had this horseshoe, which I thought was a horseshoe, and we showed it to her. And she goes, "That's actually a mule shoe." And she says, "I can tell you it's from I'm going to say this wrong, but it's like the left rear hoof. And this animal suffered from these maladies." She could just tell that by looking at that, because that's what she does, and so she knew exactly what she was looking at. I never would have dreamed you could tell that much from something like that. But it was interesting, and it just kind of made sense when we learned the history of the building and what was down there before the building was even there, So that was kind of fun.
Because of your forethought and a few others, but you were certainly one of the leaders. That block turned into one of the hottest spots in all of our town for locals to be able to congregate.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how when we travel on our feet, kind of like that mule, our stories kind of come together. They, somebody maybe in the future can tell. And you recommended a building to me on that block, which turned out to be a wonderful thing for us. And we've since sold that building to Matt Thomas and Lauren Thomas, two wonderful community local members.
Great
and they're
people.
doing wonderful things.
Yeah.
But now something I need you to come and visit is because we got another building up on 201 West Main, and we want to do what you did on East Main. We now need to do it on West Main. So I need you and the feet that traveled this before to come give us information, Ed.
Yeah, that is great. I'm glad to see so many of those being done. I always kind of joke that it took a few of us crazy people at the very beginning, that we probably weren't going to make any money on that or anything. But you know what? It was just what I wanted to do. We had a lot of fun with that. It was a great place for people to come together and, and get to meet their neighbors and have some fun there. And I was able to do my photography business out of there while after I had retired. And so, it's just what we wanted to do, and, we'll sell it down the road. And if I just even break even on it, I'm fine. I don't care. It's no big deal. But it was just a lot of fun.
Okay.
But so many other folks jumped in and did the same thing, like you said, so it just has this effect where it all builds upon each other, so everybody benefits from it.
I agree. And part of the benefit of that building for me and getting to know Ed Bolt was I began because you had your gallery there to see how serious you had become with your photographic endeavors.
Right.
And you started plugging in with a lot of different logos, but your photos are out of this world. Where can people go? What's the best place online for people to go and say, wow, those photos are good? Where can they see your photos, Ed?
Well, when I was running the photography business more serious than it grew into something I never imagined it would do. So, I had a website, edboltphoto.com. And so I would, put links on there where people could go in and see my work and buy something if they wanted to. I've let that website go. I do still have a place that if someone was interested, in fact, someone hit me up yesterday about a photo they wanted. And unfortunately right now, none of the print labs are even working, so I said, we'll have to wait to get through this situation. The lab, it's pretty cool. The big lab that I use up in the Kansas City area that I did all the schools through and dance schools and all that I processed their stuff through, they shut down because, photography is not necessarily essential. But what they did, and I thought this was really, really an amazing thing, is some of their folks stayed on and they are actually building those shields, the face shields for surgeons and so forth, because they've got the equipment to do that and they know how to do that. So that's what they're doing now is making the face shields for surgeons and doctors and just, protecting our medical personnel. So, but all the other stuff had to go on the back burner, which is understandable. You do what you got to do.
Yeah, there's a lot going on now in 30 Days of Community Building, a series by We Are City of Five Nations podcast, really believes that getting to know one another is the key within community. And when we turn those keys within community, that's what's going to change our world, our human existence, we believe, for the better. Getting to know one another and learning backgrounds and environments that have created one another helps bring us together in an understanding and in an acceptance of one another that builds strength through unity. And it's such a privilege to be able to talk to the different people from around the City of Five Nations. And now in this first part of the series, we're talking with people who I'm pretty comfortable with, people that I've known over my years within the City of Five Nations. And after the 15th of this month, we're going to try a transition. And it's always uncomfortable to introduce yourself or to step into the life or just come up and talk to someone that perhaps you don't know. And after the 15th of this month, we're going to try to have guests that I really don't know. And I'm going to have to introduce myself. They're going to have to introduce themselves. And it's just people that I would like to get to know a little bit better. Maybe I've heard of them. Maybe I've seen them in a room somewhere, or maybe I've just watched them from afar. But we're going to try to get over that hump of being uncomfortable in introducing one another. So we encourage everyone and want to thank everyone to go ahead and send in comments. If there's somebody that you would like for us to meet or you think we should meet, please, by all means, throw it into the timeline and let us know, because we really would like to hear your feedback, and we would like to hear what you think about the City of Five Nations, because all of us are what makes a positive and more healthy community and will build to have a stronger human existence, I believe, within the City of Five Nations, within our state, within our country, and all around the world. So back to today, we have Ed Bolt. And Ed, I'd like to transition into something that's a little bit uncomfortable for many to talk about, but knowing you and knowing the strength in which you walk, I want to talk to you. It wasn't long into your business and then into when you were so involved with community building that all of a sudden life threw you a curve that was something that none of us ever would like to go through. And I'd like for you to talk about the death of your son, if you would.
No.
And what happened and how you've grown from that.
Yeah, I'll be glad to do that. It is a painful thing to talk about, so bear with me. We always know. I mean, I know you have a number of kids. We always know. Oh my gosh, what would happen if I lost one of my kids? And we know that would be horrible. Until you experience it, you do not know how bad something can be. So he was 36 years old. He died of a brain aneurysm. So, I mean, it was just totally unexpected. Although looking back, we saw some things that probably were warning signs, but there wouldn't have been anything anybody could have done about it. So he was working as an electrician. He worked usually commercial type stuff, big commercial jobs. So he was down in Lawton working. And I got a call from his mother, my ex-wife, who happened to be living up in northern Kansas at the time, not far from the Nebraska line. And Phyllis and I just sat down to eat and at dinner. And, my ex-wife called me and she says, "Hey, I got a call from the hospital down in Lawton. They said EJ's there and you need to get there quickly." Of course, she's, 5 hours away, and here we are. Probably a couple hours, so I just put my sandwich down. We got in the car and we head off, and she had sent me the phone number for the hospital. So we kept calling, finally get through the emergency room, and was talking actually to the Metaflight nurse. And he said, "We're going to Metaflight him to South Oklahoma City." So luckily I happened to be at about Highway 9 and 102 at the time. So I was able to just, turn up that way, head up north, get on I-40, and we get to Oklahoma City, and we get there just a few minutes before the chopper arrives. So they bring him in, and we saw him come in, and of course he just looks like he's asleep. They had him in a coma. In my mind, he was probably, I'm sure he was brain dead at that point. So they kept his body alive, took him in. They check him out, and of course we don't get to see him. They check him out, and then we get a call. The doctor wants to talk with us, and so we go in, and this gentleman's a neurologist, and he says, "Your son has suffered a massive brain injury. We don't know exactly what has happened yet." He said, "We would just say that he's brain dead, but there's certain things that maybe could mimic that look. So we're going to try to get his body well and make sure there's nothing there that is mimicking that. And then we will check him in the morning, and we'll let you know what we determine." So we were able to see him at that point. Of course, he had no, like I said, I'm sure he was probably brain dead and Lawton when they flew him up. And that seems like, well, what a waste and everything, but it's really not. And this is one of the reasons I can't say I like talking about this, but I think it's real important to talk about this is, so here you have this, normally very healthy 36-year-old young guy, big, strong guy. And of course his brain's gone. So, I mean, he's basically dead. But they kept his body going because he had signed up. And I remember the phone call when he called and told me, I just renewed my driver's license, and I checked on there that I was an organ donor. And, and he knew that was something that I had always been and something that I had hoped he would do. So he called me, and I remember telling him how I appreciated him doing that. And of course, as a parent, you never dreamed that you would see that put into action, because I should go much before he should. So anyway, they started searching for recipients, and that took a day or two. So they kind of prolonged our experience at the hospital, but it was well worth it. So they were able to find someone that needed his lungs and his kidneys, his heart. I know his lungs went to one individual in Florida, which is unusual because usually when they do a lung, it's one, but they did both. So we're figuring it was probably someone that had like cystic fibrosis or something like that. I know his heart went to a man in his 50s in Nebraska. I know one kidney went down to southeastern Oklahoma. That person I had not met. And then another kidney went to a young girl that was about 8 years old in Tulsa. So there were five individuals that got life-saving, absolute life-saving transplants, So as bad as we felt, and this is, I mean, I can't tell you, Daniel, there's no comparison the pain you go through as a parent for this versus, I mean, you can't hurt me in any other way that be even close to this, I know that there were 5 families that had the flip side, experience. So, they were looking at a family member that they were going to lose. And, they got the phone call that now they've got the opportunity to live. So, I mean, I know it's painful for us, but for them, it was, 180 degrees. It was opposite, and we've been fortunate enough to meet the little girl in Tulsa. And let me tell you, she's a pistol. Her family came down, and, they, of course, we got grandkids about that age. And of course, they all wanted to meet her. So we had them over to the house in that pool that you were talking about earlier. And, they splashed around like little kids would. So you had this little girl that was basically on death's door, and I'm not exaggerating. And now she's running around with my grandkids and, splashing in the pool, and, she's got a great life now, So there's things that she has to go through because, they're always going to be fighting rejection and that sort of thing. And, but she's doing great, and we've gotten to be friends with them. And, we're so happy for her and happy for all the others. I would love to meet all the others. And I have reached out to them. I do not know their names, but there's a process you can go through LifeShare. And I understand it's a personal decision that they have to make, and they may not want to meet us. I know some of them feel, from what I hear, they feel sort of guilty because we suffered this loss and here they are alive, but we're nothing but happy for them. I mean, nothing was going to bring my son back, and to bury him and not do life-saving operations, that there's just no way I could do that, So, and then in addition to that, there's lots of other folks that benefited from, like, bone. They're able to harvest bone and skin and tendons. And I mean, they said most likely he probably impacted about 50 folks, but 5 of them were absolute life-saving recipients. So, we feel real good about that. Terrible situation, but it is what it is. That's what life dealt us. And, we're just glad we could help out. And since then, we have tried to be very active in promoting organ donation and, asking people to consider doing that. Cause it can be a lifesaver. Yeah.
Well, Ed Bolt, I want to add something. Could you, EJ?
Yes, sir.
Say the name of your son for us. What's your
EJ.
son's name?
Well, his full name was Edward James Bolt III. He was actually the fifth Edward in a row. But my grandfather, who was born 1901 in South Boston, his middle name was Percival. As you can tell, the family hadn't been from England very long. And his dad, who was born in London, his middle name was Pomeroy. So Edward Pomeroy Bolt. Now, when my dad was born in 1932, his dad, Edward Percival Bolt, said there's no way I'm giving a kid that middle name. Not here in the States, So he became James, and then my middle name is James. My son's middle name is James. So there were 5 of us in a row there. So
that is a story, Ed. It's something that I want to interject into that. Is it's what I see in you, my friend, in the sense that, from the beginning of knowing you, I felt welcome into your home, out on Lake Road so many years ago. But then when you started working downtown and you really dug in with safe events for families and your heart, you really are a multiplier of life. Your heart for people that you come in contact is a genuine heart to do your best in what has always seemed to me for someone else. And I don't see the selfishness, that brands human beings. What I see in Ed is a multiplying effect of life. And the story that you just told is so apropos for the example that you are, and I'm sure that you led for your entire family. It's really a story of beautiful life and of multiplication of life. And to see, because I can just imagine the joy in that little girl's face when she was swimming in Mary Jane's pool. Yeah. And Mary Jane and Gordon were the same way as you and Phyllis.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and
people.
What a beautiful story you have, Ed, through that pain that you so graciously just shared with us. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Phyllis and I feel like we've been very, very fortunate, and we think that, at this time in our life, and, we need to focus on giving back, and, Shawnee is just such a giving community. We really are. And, if somebody needs help, there's folks that step up in a heartbeat. I'm really proud of how our community comes together like that, because I do know a lot of people. People will contact me if they perceive a need. The other day, someone needed. Oh, you know what it was? It was for COTS, our transit system, our that hauls folks to their medical appointments and that kind of thing. And they were running low on masks. So they made me aware of that. And I, used the reach that I have on Facebook to contact folks and say, hey, can somebody help out? And let me tell you, people stepped up, and it was like that, and it was done. So, that's just the way our community is, and anything we can do to, help with that, we want to do, so we're just always.
Well, Ed, you are a perfect example of why the City of Five Nations is such a wonderful place. And if the more of us that can emulate the love and the caring and the giving that you and your lovely wife do on a daily basis, the better off and the stronger our community will be. Thank you very much for taking your time with us today. I know you're very busy, and thank you for sharing.
glad to do it. I honored you asked. You take care. I've enjoyed your videos. I've tried to watch as many of those as I can.
Well, I can always take advice from you, my friend, one of the most creative and beautiful painters of video and also photography that we have here in the City of Five Nations. And I'm not blowing smoke. When you went into your drone footage and you went into the different pictures, what you do, you always pursue excellence. And hey, I'm just proud to be able to witness it, man.
Well, Daniel, I appreciate everything you're doing for the community. I really do. I mean, I think this is really important what you're doing here, and like I say, just helping people get to know each other. I think that is so important. So, thank you for that.
Hey, well, thanks, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care.
We'll see you again soon.
All righty. Goodbye.
That's Ed Bolt, community member of the City of Five Nations, another great community member of the City of Five Nations. And here in the City of Five Nations, we really believe that all of us, when we can help and get over ourselves a little bit and just talk to one another, what we learn about the other individual is so important for our prosperity as a community. Because we're going to learn something new every time with an open heart and an open mind that we engage with one another who live in our 5 or 10 mile radius. Because that's where we spend 85% of our time. And now even more of our time, probably 95%, if you don't mind me just throwing something out, of our time is spent within 5 miles of our own home. So why not just be open with the people who are around us, because there's so much diversity here in the City of Five Nations, and it's so much fun to be able to get to know our neighbors. And talking about neighbors, tomorrow's show is going to be an excellent show as we welcome Community Renewal and the team from Community Renewal led by Brandon Dyer. And they will talk to us about the different things that are happening in the neighborhoods of the City of Five Nations. We look so forward, as Ben Williams says, to right now, spending this time with you, but tomorrow, don't miss the We Are City of Five Nations podcast as Community Renewal and the good people that are working for neighborhoods simply by the motto, we care, period. Will be telling us stories on the podcast tomorrow. So please tune in, like on the side, or leave us questions that you'd like for us to ask or comments. And remember, after the 15th, I'm looking for people that I don't know. So if there's somebody that you think that I need to meet, please recommend them, and we'll reach out and we'll try to make the connections, more connections than are already being made within our community. So as always, thank you. And remember, in the City of Five Nations, together, we are building community one season at a time. Have a great day, everybody.